He had spent the previous 50 minutes paying close attention to his last patient of the day at 4:30. She was a local socialite who had recently divorced and was quite attractive, though in a way that he didn't find appealing. Since their fights over the husband's startup bonanza had not yet resulted in the birth of any children, they had been attempting to free her from a miserable marriage for almost a year. The patient had grown attracted to her handsome therapist during their time together in psychotherapy, probably because he gave her the delectable complete attention to her thoughts and feelings that her husband was unable to. He had dealt with this transference in a firm but kind way, assisting her in refocusing her attention on discovering how and why she had made such a poor partner selection. They both felt good about their collaboration as he held the door open for her to leave. His cell phone gave the single buzz that served as a notification that his mistress had left him a message as the door clicked shut and he turned to write his note on the laptop sitting on his desk. He pulled the slim device from his pants pocket and saw the terse preview of the rest of his evening, which caused his clock to instantly stand up. The notification read, "Mistress had a difficult day. After preparing the bathroom for your preparation, meet her there." His memory immediately flooded him with images and feelings. His adorable statuesque mistress insisted on venting her frustrations over her grueling work schedule on her husband's extremely adorable behind. She had compared it to Michelangelo's David, the pinnacle of male rear beauty, whose body she insisted bore a striking resemblance to his. But she continued to frequently need to severely punish that aspect of him despite her appreciation for his aesthetic taste. Instead, she repeatedly proclaimed during one of their sessions that his physical attractiveness almost compelled her to strip him and spank him frequently. To let a male behind such an adorable go unpunished for more than a day or two would be equivalent to wasting a valuable national resource. But her order to get ready in their opulent Pack Heights penthouse bathroom meant that his feisty mistress was especially irritated by her day at her law office. She was a high-end divorce attorney who was regarded by the city's elite as the ball-busting B*TCH women wanted to hire to extract the maximum amount of resentment from their unsatisfactory husbands. She was his most lucrative referral source, which was advantageous for their financial situation. However, this network was painful for his posterior because all resentment over his imagined sex desires for the attractive divorcees she sent him would be vented on the area that, according to her, God had so meticulously planned to receive corporal punishment. She enjoyed that he served as a stand-in for men who tried to metaphorically fuck their long-suffering wives in the ass yet again after years of marital punishment, as his gorgeous blonde Nordic goddess often observed when painfully examining his nether regions. She thought it only right that the same thing happened to our hero's adorable buttocks to karmically balance this outrage. More often than not, he was relieved that his mistress would be performing a very high, hot, and hard soapy water enema so that his back passage wouldn't contaminate her strap-on when he was told to get ready in the bathroom. She required him to thoroughly clean the enormous dildo with which she would be fucking his well-spanked ass, so he felt relieved. He was also appreciative that he could button his blazer for the short distance from his office to their high-rise. He had a much larger collection of genital accessories than Michelangelo's desired Renaissance object, according to his mistress, who claimed that his naked form was superior to that of the famous David. His mistress took great pleasure in his unyielding 8-inch erection, driving him to several orgasms each night as he played with her firm, small breasts and engorged the clitoris with his hands. She was so adorable that he was eager to see her just from looking at her. But she made it very clear that she owned his orgasm completely. Without her express permission, he would have to endure a long, brutal spanking of the balls. This was a grim fate that made him cringe. However, at least once per week, she would experience a frisky mood and become especially repulsed by men's mistreatment of women. She would enjoy coercing him into coming here against his will so she could punish the causes of his maleness without feeling guilty. The appearance of fairness must be upheld, if for no other reason than his fierce mistress could use him however she pleased. In any case, the rock-hard erection that our hero would have for the remainder of the evening was nearly hidden by the blue blazer that was buttoned up against the evening fog. He always maintained a rock-solid posture in her presence, which his mistress loved. "The dick never lies," she would often say. When anything erotic was present, His nearly permanent erection revealed the truth about how he felt about her dominance. Since they both preferred to perform their almost nightly scenes on an empty stomach, they wouldn't be eating until later. This is especially true if he was to get spanked and have his balls fucked. There's no need to run the risk of her torturing his priceless orbs indulgently and making him throw up. And if being hungry made her irritable, that was all to the good in her eyes. Since his delicate undercarriage could suffer agonizingly as a result of that grumbling. He admired her for insisting on texting him before he left work, hijacking his psychoanalytically trained mind to his covert existence as her adoring butt boy. She wanted him to struggle to keep his erection hidden from his gorgeous receptionist, who had long ago made it clear that she was available for any fling he might deign to engage in with her luscious body. His mistress loved to keep his buttocks so he was constantly aware of their primary function in their sexual life while he was sitting. She had a strict rule that she was never allowed to make a mark that would last more than a few days or draw blood. However, that still left more than enough space for a wide range of artistic torments of his gorgeous manly moons and their surroundings. She wanted his nether cheeks and the space between them to constantly be sore as a physical reminder of her dominion in his every waking moment. His mistress preferred to bind him so that he could be punished. She did this partially for artistic reasons because she liked how his naked body looked while bound in such vulnerable positions. However, she also asserted that by releasing him from any anxiety about putting up a fight against his suffering, binding him elaborately ironically allowed him to give himself fully to the intense experiences she delighted in inflicting on him. He was most likely going to be held down on his back in their enormous bed if their scene began in the bathroom. His naked body would be placed on a plush bath sheet made of Egyptian cotton to catch the drips, as she put it, because he would be perspiring a lot from the pain. His legs would also be bound to the upper bedposts by gentle white ropes, forcing him into a sharp V that blatantly exposed his genitalia, inner thighs, and ass. Then, after carefully monitoring his diet and exercise to keep his abs well defined, she would pass another rope around his trim waist and tie it off to eye bolts drilled into the bottom of the sideboards of their bed. She loved his abs. This rope was tightened to ensure that no matter how intensely he was stimulated, any movements of the areas she loved to target with her untender mercies would not interfere with her aim. If their scene began in the restroom, he could expect a good, thorough ass-fucking. She enjoyed doing that while seated at the foot of the bed so she could strike him with full force. As a result, once he was tied, his ass would be bent and splayed tightly, extending just past the edge of their mattress. She also had other preferences for this particular position. One of them was that she could spread out a wide assortment of the punishment tools she intended to use next to them on the bed so he could see what was in store for his bound, helpless body. There would undoubtedly be leather and wooden paddles, some with numerous tiny holes drilled into them to allow air to pass through, allowing her targets to feel the full force of each spanking. Given how beautifully they curved around his thighs and delivered a sharp, even pain down their entire length, straps of various thicknesses would be included. For their capacity to reach delicate crevices like those bordering his crotch and of course his nether cleavage, a few whips and a switch or two would be included. She especially enjoyed punishing them severely to soften it and fully appreciate his eventual sodomization. Of course, there would also be the despised little wooden spoon, whose internal contour was specifically chosen to resemble the shape of his testicles. The private jewelry she had given him on their wedding night would rain these as usual. He was required to wear a clever white gold circlet around the base of his scrotum at all times as part of her private ritual to make his balls permanently available for her purposes. The main benefit of binding him, however, was that she was free to use all of these tools while riding his head on her thighs, keeping his mouth busy between her legs. She described him as a very shrewd linguist who was adept at using his mouth to get her off remarkably. Her preferred tactic was to pick a weapon and a target area and spank him there until he was able to make her go into orgasm. At first, that might occur in a minute or two. But as their evening went on, each of her climaxes would last longer and give her more freedom to relish punishing him. That could imply that he might experience a half hour of excruciating pain before her tempestuous culmination, which would set him free by the time for his balls spanking. His cruel mistress, she preferred to think of herself as thorough and meticulous, typically followed a certain pattern when a scene started in the bathroom. While she meditated on their deck, he would have prepared the enema apparatus, filling the bag to the brim with steaming soapy water and attaching the nozzle, which ended in an inch-diameter plastic sphere to ensure that it would remain in place while the fluids were being infused and stirred. Before being assisted to bend over her lap, his hands would have been bound together at the wrists and his ankles would have been fastened to the ends of a 4-foot spreader bar to offer up his bottom as she preferred. If she lubricated his cock, he would be in a very difficult situation. This was because she insisted on swiftly spanking his delicately parted buttocks with a powerful large ebony hairbrush to agitate his enema after it was fully administered. The lube was used to prevent any future chafing between his cock and its delicious prison between her trim, muscular thighs, which would have diminished her enjoyment of his cock. He would have to choose between being spanked until he got between her thighs or getting his balls spanked, which would be the unfortunate outcome. On some level, he knew that the least painful course of action was to simply let go and enjoy an easy orgasm by concentrating on how hot his situation was. He could not, however, agree to simply accept having his balls punished by the wooden spoon's handle, followed by the convexity and then the concavity. So, after receiving a thorough fucking from her with the plastic sphere, he would wriggle over to her lap. However, he would quake and buck even more ferociously as the rock-hard hairbrush delivered a fierce beating, forcing him to lose his semen on the toilet. Only then would he be set free and permitted to expel the thoroughly stirred waters inside, leaving his back passage spotless in preparation for her enormous strap-on's eventual depredation. He was constantly ashamed of how quickly his erection returned following the initial spanking and fucked orgasm. They both knew what a hopeless pain slut but boy he was, so it was kind of silly, but still. Was it necessary for his subjugation to be so glaringly apparent, sticking out like a sore thumb as he exited the bathroom after meticulously cleaning himself? As he walked humbly to the bed to assume the position for significantly more humiliating events to happen to his ass, thighs, and balls, it would bob carelessly with each step. Oh, and his nipples too, of course. Once he was securely fastened, she enjoyed choosing and using powerful nipple clamps on his extremely delicate nubbins. Before she was satisfied, they would need to be changed several times, each fierce pinch made him groan and his cock leap. Then she would mount his head, drastically shrinking his world. Her flawless womanly ass descending over his face was the last thing he would see for several hours. She would occasionally shift positions while he was spanking her, giving him a break from the cunnilingus he was usually required to perform by allowing him to fuck her anus. He reveled in the sheer nastiness of having to force his tongue into her nether region. Additionally, he enjoyed how each episode of anilingus accelerated the onset of her subsequent orgasm, thereby reducing the duration of at least one of his spankings. His freshly spanked buttocks would typically be paddled with leather until she reached her first climax in these. Since she would be intensely aroused from having spanked and fucked his ass to orgasm, this usually only took a few seconds. That would entail a second, more ferocious round of paddling with a wooden paddle, upping the ante as the heat in his ass would be rising quickly. Then a strap or two would be placed on his inner thighs and backs, exposing a new body part to the pleasures of corporal punishment. Then, perhaps, a switch would be used to return to his thighs and ass first with its rectilinear liquid lightning bolts of pain. The softwood would end up having a nice, long conversation with the delicate crevices squeezing his crotch, thighs, and ass as a result of his switching. She adored how fiercely his butt cheeks would tremble as the switch tore searing agony down its infinitely sensitive center line, which they were meant to protect. The spoon wouldn't be picked up and placed on his caged testicles until that point. He might be forced to let her off after each portion of his ball spanking if she was acting flirtatious. The spoon's hollow would be used to administer the first serving, giving the skin on the scrotum an even mild sting. The underlying testes would then experience a more intense, visceral pain after being struck with the back of the spoon. The spoon would then be turned around, held by the bowl, and the handle would be used to spank both of his balls. This always caused him to scream the loudest into her muffled crotch until he finally put an end to his torture by removing her for good. When she was ready, she would jump off of his head and put her strap on. She had a special device with an inner and outer plastic attachment point, a vibrating leather triangle that would cover her crotch, and a leather triangle. A small, curved dildo that would hit her G-spot exactly could be screwed onto the inside point, sandwiching her sexual organ between it and the vibrating leather patch, which would intensify the more forcefully she fucked him. An assortment of screw-on dildos in various sizes and shapes could be inserted into the outer point. One that she had made from a mold of his cock in full erection was her most recent favorite. The female technician who performed this mold appeared to take pleasure in his humiliation as his mistress made him strip and fondled his genitalia to prepare him for the procedure by getting him to reach full erection. The statuesque blonde, whose fierce way of loving him so completely obsessed our hero, appeared amused by the idea of her handsome husband fucking himself. As soon as his large prepuce managed to slip past his anal ring, he would start groaning once more and start as fucking in earnest. She took great pleasure in making him scream with the intensity of her sodomy as she plowed his rear furrow with great enthusiasm until she came at least twice. Then it would be announced that he could go with her consent. His eager cock and aching, inflamed balls would receive a generous dollop of lube from her strong, cool hands. She would jerk off the first while vigorously massaging the second until he reached a huge climax and spewed seed all over his perspiring abs and chest. As our hero walked several steep blocks from his office to their high-rise, all of these potential outcomes for the upcoming evening raced through his agitated mind. He was led into the elevator by the doorman, who greeted him politely. He had the impression that the 20-floor journey to their penthouse was very similar to the gradual ascent before the first drop of a roller coaster. To enter their private domain in the undressed state she always demanded of him, he followed her instructions and entered their foyer before removing all of his clothing to leave in their cloakroom. He took one final, deep breath to try and get himself as steady as possible, then entered the code for their front door and went inside to follow the directions to go to the bathroom. He knocked on the door to their meditation deck after finishing up there because he knew his mistress would be there waiting for him. He took one last deep breath as she rose to tenderly embrace him, and down the roller coaster plunged into yet another fierce gem of erotic intensity. Right now, I couldn't possibly be anyone or anywhere else in the universe.